Now, in her remarks yesterday, the White House spokesperson said, we think we're getting close to the end of this investigation. And then the Chief of Staff, General Kelly, reiterated that, saying, we think we're pretty much through it. Does that sound plausible to you that this early on they could be approaching the end of this investigation?
Well, I mean, I think that may be a little ambitious. I mean, this signals sort of, once public proceedings have been announced and the first indictments returned, I guess in some sense, that's the beginning necessary to get to the end. But that process could be, fairly protracted. I think the hope still is, though, that, this investigation doesn't extend beyond 2018 and into, well into an election year. Whether that's doable or not, I guess we don't know, and that remains to be seen. I don't think everybody seems to have learned the lesson of it's not desirable to have this thing extend on through the entirety of President Trump's term in office. I mean, it seems to me that one could expect that we get to the bottom of this, obviously sooner rather than later, over that span of time. But, again, this is just the first phase of the public phase of the investigation. I don't know that we could say that we can see light at the end of the tunnel. I think, the White House has the right to push back and to expect that, this thing will reach critical mass and a conclusion one way or another. And their position still is, which, there isn't any evidence to suggest, at least at this moment, that campaign officials were, in fact, complicit in an effort to collude with the Russian government. And the Papadopoulos plea, at least in the stipulation of facts, if you read them closely and carefully, as I have done and many others have done, suggests that while there were efforts made to try to get meetings with Russian government officials during the course of the campaign, at least from what we know at this point, those meetings never actually took place. So if that remains true, and we sort of pass through an investigation that analyzes what happened during the summer of 2016, and it never got any further than that, then I suspect, the conclusion of this investigation will be, yes, efforts were made. This is what the Russians wanted, but the campaign officials were not really complicit.
And finally, Mr. Ray, because you have dealt with this before in Washington, how does this fit with what's going on up on the Hill, particularly, for example, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence? I mean, they're conducting investigations at the same time. How do these fit together? Can that interfere or delay Mr. Mueller's investigation? It
can, but it looks like behind the scenes, much of which we really don't know about, but there are obviously a lot of conversations going on between the political folks on the Hill and the congressional investigations and investigators and representatives of Bob Mueller's office, so that there are not collisions between the two. There can be parallel paths. There are occasions when there may be discussions about allowing, for example, Bob Mueller's investigators to go first before congressional investigators get involved. But, there's a political process involved here as well, and a political dynamic, one that cannot be ignored. And obviously, Bob Mueller has to, in certain sense, give way, too, to allow congressional investigations to do what they're going to do, because there are political consequences to this, in addition to what we saw obviously last week and early this week. There are legal consequences, and people can be charged with crimes, and people may well go to jail as a result of this process.